Hi again. I'm Johan, and in this talk I will present you the work on Yesplan. Yesplan is an event venue management system uh, built in talk, and it's been 15 years ago that we started first lines of Yesplan. This in 2009. So what is Yesplan? Well, it's a web application, a software as a service application, which is there to does everything to manage your event venue. What's an event venue? We all know this: cultural theaters, art centers, cinemas, even some museums, festivals, concert halls. These are the typical customers that use Yesplan. And what do they do with Yesplan? Well, of course, they plan all the events that are going on in the event venue. And that includes just a calendar, of course, with all the data which has associated to this event, but also about all contacts and relations, suppliers, people that have to do with this event. You have to manage a customer relationship management system. Resources, lightning, engineers, so people, human resources, when they would have to work. And then this, of course, all costs something, both to the event venue. There's a price that they need to calculate, and also that they could use, of course, to invoice to customers organizing events in the event venue. So, and that, of course, includes things like features like reporting as well in there. So here's just a couple of larger cultural event venues which are amongst the customers using Yesplan. I think one of the largest is the Kulturhuset Stockholm, but maybe not the most widely known. If you have the Sheffield Theatres, this is where the World Championship of Snooker is organized every year. So those people watching snooker, that's partially organized in Yesplan, I would say. There's also Flagey in Brussels, for example, from the Queen Elizabeth yearly, the world famous competition of music. Or, for example, other things like Oslo Concertus and so on. So those are the typical customers which use the Yesplan application. So what will I do in this talk about Yesplan? Well, I'll give you a quick demonstration of what the system is, how it works. If I really need to demonstrate, of course, everything that is in Yesplan, we need more than 2 hours. So I'll try to just give you a brief glimpse to get an impression about what this system does. And then maybe the longest part of the talk, of course, I will try to give an overview of the most important points of the tech stack that is behind running Yesplan. Then first a bit of history. As I said, we started in 2009. It's a collaboration between Art Center Vooruit, which is a cultural center in Ghent. And if you were at ESUG in, I think 2011, that's where that's the cultural event venue. Which created Yesplan together with 3 people, which are software engineers, so developers, amongst I am one, and that's Inceptive. So both of us, both of these actually founded the Yesplan application, and in 2011 we became a company, a separate company, and started actually selling the system to other cultural event venues in Belgium, the Netherlands, and then the rest of Europe. Going to the US and the world, let's say. And in 2022, so 2 years ago, we got acquired by ActivityStream. So Yesplan is now part of the product suite, which is offered to cultural event venues or event venues in general by ActivityStream. And actually, we always wanted to, as a mission of Yesplan, is to enable the organization of event venues and with an application that is also nice to use, because in the beginning, we went to customers and we say, we have something to help you organize events. And they said, oh, we have Excel, which is, yeah, but take a look at this. We don't need it. Take a look at it. And then, oh, we need this. So the part of having an enjoyable user experience for the people who need to organize these events was important. So, demo time. Of course, I'll be using my local installation here, so it's full of development test data, not real world. So I could open another one just to give you an impression of how a real planning looks like, but for demo purposes, let's do it like this. So when you log into Yesplan, all right. So when you log into Yesplan, the central part is the calendar interface. That's of course the overview of what kind of events are being organized in the system, and that's how everybody of the entire organization would log into it. You have horizontally dates, and vertically these are locations. Now the locations themselves, they can be customized, of course. This is customizable by the user. They can enter as many locations as you want. We have cultural event venues ranging from 10 locations to 500. And that would be a scalable, that's a scalability challenge. So of course you cannot open them all at once, but you can easily enter or remove or add things here. So everything is customizable here. This is just plain CSS possibilities. But in this case, for example, all the dynamicness, I could have an event which is organized on the 11th of November, but I'll just move this one to the 2nd to the 12th here, and all other things. I could also, of course, have in-place editing, which is everything is there. So this is the overview of events. Events are like single events in a location, but you can also group them together. That's when I hover over them. So that's how they have the concept of festivals or things which belong together. Like, for example, here the film festival, which is then a couple of different events in different locations and so on. I'll open the film festival. So, for example, then I double click, and then I get diving into the details of the event, of course, which has a lot of tabs. And these tabs are also customizable, and all the data they put on the tabs is customizable. And that's also ranges from a couple of tens customizable fields to a couple of thousands they would enter. And don't ask me, but they have lots of data they want to associate with the event. And then, of course, they also want this rolling out in a report. And we broke Excel in the beginning when they said, okay, I want to export everything. And in the beginning, well, 15 years ago, there was a limit to the amount of columns in Excel. And that didn't work because there was so many columns. Anyway, so that's just an overview here of custom fields. We have all kinds of custom fields. So with enter date fields, just text field drop-downs, checkboxes, and so on. We offer those all kinds of things. Also, just auto completion within. I guess I'm myself. Oh, this is a contact. Well, should be in there. I'm not in there. Oh, that's the administrator. So, of course, all of this runs C-side in the backend. So all the basic interface is C-side, and it's the things I was explaining. We started out with C-side plain rendering, but that didn't work. It didn't scale quite fast, as you can see here. We imagined first a calendar with just this amount of locations, but the first thing that event venue does is have 50 locations, and they open a calendar for an entire year. And then whenever you do any update here, they want it to be very snappy, like you see here. So immediately we started, of course, implementing a jQuery Ajax updates, and having the system doing those things. So an event is actually complete with schedules. There's no schedule here, so I'll just add one just to give you an example, a feel of how this works. I think this is an autocompleter, but I don't know I think I can enter anything, so that doesn't really matter. So, but you have details of the event going from one thing to the other. Everything they can enter here. They can customize whether people can enter any kind of value, or they are not allowed to enter other values, and so on. So everything you see here is really only just the default. I'll go through the system settings, but as I mentioned, it's impossible to give you an overview of how customizable it is. These are then the locations. These are different ways of entering the resources. So I'll book some beer on the event here. Let's put 100 beers. So for the entire film festival, I reserve that. But of course, normally you would enter like a light engineer here, or other elements. And then, for example, if they plan events, this is mostly 2 years in advance. They wouldn't want somebody specific on it, so they would just have an engineer, and then they have a placeholder. That means in their planning, they can see, well, I need that many lighting engineers, I need that many receptionists for the events, and so on. And they can just, afterwards, they can actually use drag and drop to fill those in. Or here with an autocompleter, I'm swapping it with somebody who has, well, Frank. Frank is actually an engineer in our test theater here. So then you can assign this to him. Prices are in there. I'll not go into detail. Also tasks associated to it. Yeah, just some overview. What's your margin? What's your cost? How much are you charging for this event? They want stuff rolling out and everything. Yeah, have an entire logging history. Very important. It would sometimes come up, oh, we have an event which was gone. So who did this? Everything is logged, of course, in the system. A quite extensive permission system because everybody in the entire theater is allowed to log in, from the CEO of the theater to the cleaning personnel. They need to log into Yesplan, and then you have a quite extensive permission system on who is allowed to do what. And then, of course, all custom tabs, and that's where they organize the real data, which is important to them. So everything is customizable. Yeah, events have a status and a profile. That's the colors you see here. And these are also customizable. I go to an option request. No, doesn't look very nice. Go to a confirmed option. But I'll also say, well, the profile here right now is project. I have something called PH. And these are all customizable options, of course, because every theater has its own way of working with this system. That's the calendar in the event inspector. Could, of course, just start scrolling through my entire year. Dynamically extensible here. I have a way of searching for availability so that you can, or looking for an event or some room. There's a couple of cultural centers who have like courses being organized, so they would look for a place to organize a tango course, for example, during every Tuesday evening. Where can I do this? As examples and so on. There's also team planning. So once you have all the events are in there, they need to do the same thing for people, not just rooms where they would assign an event to. And that's, for example, here. And then the events are on the right-hand side. And planning people on an event is just as simple as dragging and dropping the schedule here. And now this guy is actually planned. I'll take another person who has a contract, which then shows you something else, which is important because the Yesplan also helps them to adhere to labor rules, which are customizable per country, because people are not allowed to work for more than that many hours without breaks, or have minimum amount of time in between different schedules and so on. And these are all very important things, and Yesplan will actually help you not to overload your employees. And so it actually shows lots of conflicts in the system. Actually, you can enter everything into it. You can double book rooms and everything. We take the philosophy of it's better that they are able to enter anything, and we just have a lot of warnings and conflicts of things you need to solve to make a coherent planning. And then, of course, also the amount of time that people are working. If I do a new shift here, I think normally it should show that I'm working 24 hours here, for example. Yeah, and then there's just the overview of getting your resources to book on a system. You have your entire database of resources you can assign to an event, keeping track of double booking, contacts to assign, same thing, different interface. So everything I was showing before is plainly C-side with Ajax jQuery updates. When we did the resources here, they wanted to be able to search immediately and have immediate feedback. So at that time we said, yeah, that's going to be really difficult with the client-server round trip. So this was before there were other JavaScript frameworks. So that's actually completely vanilla JavaScript implemented, but that when you started searching, that it would be completely client-side. It's a little bit changed. But then the other parts here, for example, the contacts here, this is actually a jQuery data tables wrapped in a React.js component. So there we took more of existing approaches, and this is a completely client-side component, but it's integrated inside of our C-side application. As the thing I mentioned on Wednesday, I just have a C-side component in there which doesn't have any of its own rendering. It just renders a script which initializes this React component on the website. I could maybe enter and get some things. Completely customizable in columns, so I'm not going to go through all those things. Just a way of searching and so on and so on. And then just to give you an idea of how customizable the system is, for events, you would say these are all my custom data fields. These are all the possible types, and they would enter, as I mentioned, a couple of 500 ones. All the tabs, they would give their own tabs, give them an order, give them a visibility to who can view which tab. statuses with specific meanings. Some things are an option or whatever. Allowed to enter actual values or not, depending on whether you are pre-invoicing, after invoicing. Colors, limited set of colors. We didn't want to see people having Yesplan with really crazy, crazy set of colors. So that's our interaction designer that kind of prohibited it, because I put a tool in there. We could select any kind of color, and it was like, no, you restrict the amount of colors here. Any interaction designers. So yeah, labels, schedule descriptions, and all these things can actually be configured. So just to give you an overview here, that's the Yesplan application, and that's what these cultural centers are using to plan entirely their events. Needs to be online 24/7. Most of the uses are, of course, activities done during the day. Because that's when people are mostly actively planning. But during the night, all the information needs to be available when the event is happening, so they are able to look it up. So any downtime we have is something which is very annoying. So we don't have a lot of them. I will show you. But it needs to be all the time up. That's very important. Another thing I can show, and that is where we went completely React.js, so everything here now is also embedded inside of the Seaside application, but here we went completely React.js, and this is a way to create our grids, I would say, or data tables, so they can create their own reports. For example, I will create a report about events, and I can go and select some columns, and you immediately see here why this isn't created with a Seaside application, but more as a client application running inside your browser, is because we have much more immediate feedback. So for an event, I can see all the possible properties, and then I can go and dive into a certain property, add that to my definition of the columns, and then just fill in. And now I have for a couple of default parameters here. I'll just enter start and end date as conditions, and then I can have a list here. This is also infinite scrolling interface. Can change my conditions, so we have an entire system built on top of the data model of Yesplan, so that we can easily add other conditions and other possibilities, so they can create tabular reports. We have other reports which are PDF reports and so on, which we have to design, and that this would be the input to such reports. All right, that's already a long time. So, no, shouldn't go here. Right. So this is giving you a brief idea of what actually the application is doing. And just to give you a couple of numbers, we have a little over 480 venue customers. So these are venues, mostly in Europe. We are starting to get some in the US. One of the biggest things was adapting the Yesplan interface to US date, and especially non-military time interface. So a couple of things there. Some shortcuts we took were in the way, but mostly, just designing a way to, if you're entering times in a fast way, AM, PM, and then also us as Europeans trying to work with it. Interesting. We have about 23,000 users. That's because we don't charge per user, so they just enter everybody in the entire system, every venue. So we are charging per venue, not per user. But most of them are 50% of them are actually active users. So we take an active user, we take the statistic that they have logged in today, every day, and so about 50% of these are active users. And during any given day, the peak time, we have about 4,000 sessions. So 4,000 simultaneously active users using the system. And at this time, we're almost at 10 million of events which have been added to the system, and in roughly about 18,000 locations, so columns. And it's not one system, it's distributed among different instances. So this is the sum of all, right? Just to brag a little bit. So this, for example, is a Grafana screenshot I took last week, where it shows you the number of sessions per day. You can clearly see when there is the Saturday and Sunday. There the system is used less intensively, because the most intensive usage is people planning events, not people consulting data. So in there you see, for example, every Tuesday is the most busiest day of Yesplan has the highest peaks. You have to take a look at the green ones. The blue ones are overhead of just people hitting the login page. So that gives you an idea, but it's a sum of all our instances, as I will tell you. There we run every customer in a separate instance. Just some technical numbers. So we've been doing this for 15 years, and we're at version 31, which means we have 31 major versions which were released. The major version, which we would define as we need to have a downtime for the customer, meaning that we have to do some data migrations. And all the rest is, of course, like bug fix releases. Just to, well, you might find this a lot or not, depends, but just to give an idea of the size of the system, it's about 500,000 lines of Smalltalk code, and then about 100,000 of JavaScript, CSS, and there's a couple of other things, of course. Roughly 400 C-side components and 670 data model classes. It's because we have lots of kinds of data. I wasn't able to show you everything, but this is quite an extensive data model. We have about 10,000 automated tests, which we run every night or on request. And most of those are user interface tests, so they take quite a few time. So 2.5 hours of build time over the parallelized testing. I'll show you later as well. And so these 480 customers, they translate to 480 gemstone databases running. And we have 41 servers. So, and over those 15 years, I would say, number went up and down for a couple of times, but I would say we average out on 5 developers. So that's just a bit of background there. So the tech stack of Yesplan, these I tried to put the most important ones on here. And first, let's zoom in on our use of Pharo and Gemstone, because what we are doing is developing in Pharo and deploying in Gemstone. So what does that mean? I have it, of course, the demo I gave here was running in Pharo. So as a developer, I can just run Yesplan with Pharo, but it's of course not in a scalable way. I don't have a database. Well, the image is my database in this case. But we just use Git, of course, to store, and using Iceberg now in the more recent ones. Previously, we used Monticello, of course, but now source code from Pharo goes into Git. And then we just use Metacello to load this into Gemstone. So very easy, nothing else to it actually. You just need to take into account, of course, some differences between Pharo and Gemstone. That's what you need to do. But of course, sometimes you need to do some things or need to do some development in Gemstone and take a look at the bug there, do some debugging. So there, at this moment, we use Jade and maybe some GemTools still. Yes, it's still it's still running around. That's because we historically used that to connect to the Gemstone and then they'll debug your system. And if we need to, we would from there publish it using Monticello file tree back into the Git repository if I make some code changes, but most of the time I would just make the code change in Pharo, publish it there, and then load it back into Gemstone. Much easier. What is probably the key point and my major best experience with this approach is that when we do some deployment in Gemstone, we have the object log, and any production error is being saved into the database. So your entire debugger is immediately available in the database. And in the beginning, we had some, we always write bugs, but especially in the beginning, we wrote some bugs, and the early customers, of course, and they were very, very wary about the fact that we were just beginning. But the fact that when there was an error, we were actually able to repair this in a very fast time, at least for them. They said, yeah, you had errors, but you also fixed them in no time. And I think this was one of the major advantages to that, immediately having the ability to look at the bug, having all the data available, and well, actually even fixing it immediately, of course. If it required only small code changes, you could immediately patch the system. I think this is still one of the most important parts. When I go to the JavaScript stack, I don't have this. I miss this especially. Another thing is that if you were at ESUC in Barcelona, where I presented Yesplan when we first started and we didn't know whether we would have customers, we actually started out at Vooruit running not with Gemstone, but using the GoodsDB connected to Pharo 1 something. But we actually quite fastly hit just the performance limits of that system. And then I just took a a graph here from that presentation back then when we loaded 100,000 objects into our Seaside session, let's say, and then tried to modify one object and see how long the commit took. For example, goods with a manual barrier, of course, went really fast, but magma and goods with an automated barrier, that took us 6 seconds, and it was impossible to use, of course. And with Gemstone, the number there is quite large. I don't exactly know what I measured there. So anyway, I took the graph especially to show you the difference, and that's when we decided, well, we need to move to Gemstone, and we'll use the performance there. So that happened in 2011. And there is, of course, a big difference. We used to have every Seaside session was a database connection. For every Seaside user, every session was opening a database connection to the goods DB, because that's a different view. We relied on transactions to have conflicts between sessions being reported. When we moved to Gemstone and with the glass version of Seaside, every request is a transaction, so you have to deal with this differently. I don't have time to explain that, but that's what the major difference is, and we have an abstraction layer for it. So there's Greece helping you making or taking care, or at least what Seaside uses to abstract the differences between Faro or the different platforms between Faro and Gemstone. So you use Metacello, Glass, of course. Maybe in the future we can use GT for Gemstone and Jadeite to do the development instead of using Jade. But what I always say, the development in well, the pros here are using Gemstone, of course, is that transparent persistency. People, I can let people develop in Faro and just say, yeah, don't worry about these the transactions. They just will happen in Gemstone, because every transaction, every request made in the Seaside application is actually just a transaction. So that's a pro. They don't have to think about it. New people on the development team don't have to really think about these differences. Especially, we don't have to care about object relational mapping. I don't have to explain people that who are using an object-oriented database. We can just do the queries in Smalltalk, just like what we've seen with Norbert. And it's, of course, a live debugging of production environment. That's what I have been showing. I also listed the transparent persistency as a negative point. That's because at that point, at some point, you have to think about it is not transparent, and there is a performance impact, and there are transactions. So, of course, this is also a negative side of trying to hide something that is there. So I listed it as both a pro and a con to do that. All right, I have to go faster because, all right, another part, of course, in the development, and I'll go really fast, but it's basically also what I've been showing on my first talk. In the beginning, we developed just plain Seaside application. We noticed that, okay, this is not going to scale because we have to re-render this entire interface all the time. It takes too long. So you have Ajax updates. But at some point, we thought, okay, all these scripts, they are growing. I just put a couple of snippets there, which things are coming more and more complex with jQuery scripts. So at some point, we started introducing, and this is the old interface of a tree view. Oh, I didn't open the tree view, but you could also visualize these events as a tree view. First, we did that with Seaside dynamic SVG, so server-side generation of SVG. But this was, of course, not going to give you the interaction and the dynamicity of a user interface. So we moved towards client-side implementation, in this case, using D3GS, for example. But also the embedding of React.js, and especially like the data views interface here, we started implementing for all the user interfaces requiring more dynamic updates directly in the browser. We actually moved to React.js integrated inside of the Seaside application. So I went over that a little bit quicker. Other operations, as I mentioned, every venue has its own database, one stone. This is commercially a very good argument because they will always ask you, how do you make sure that the data will not leak to another customer? And I will just say, well, it's impossible to leak because it's a different database. So no developer error will ever result in a data leak to another customer. You might, of course, copy the database somewhere else, but that's something else. And no programmer error will yield a data leak issue here. On another side, of course, everything is done as a separated container, let's say. So what we do is we have about 12 stones per server, mostly memory bound, because we would give we give 1 gigabyte of shared page cache to every customer. So that means already like 12 gigabytes just for the shared page cache. So we put 12 stones per server. There's 3 gems, which is the seaside virtual machines handling HTTP traffic. So for every stone, so every venue has 3 parallel virtual machines handling the HTTP traffic. And then there's 1 gem handling like long-running tasks. If you enter a query, run a report, run a data view, that takes too long to be done in the time frame of handling HTTP requests. So that's actually offloaded to a service fem. All of this is automated using Ansible playbooks. So we have 480 stones. That means we have 480 stones to maintain. Of course, all of that is automated. Setting up a server, setting up a customer, removing it, upgrading it, everything is done through Ansible. We could say, well, on this server, it's getting a little bit too busy. We don't have dynamic load balancing of busy customers or larger customers. We would more do this on looking at, okay, maybe this server is too many large customers, and then we would move a customer to another server just with 10 minutes of downtime or something. And with this, actually, we avoid also to have to think about running a multi-tenant system and thinking about how to scale a multi-tenant system. You just avoid it. It's a bit of the same. It's the same argument that Norbert was making. You just do not try to solve the scaling issue here. You just have every customer. It's more or less predictable how much they will use because it's one venue. You never need to think about suddenly peaks of millions of users inside of this system. So every customer is more or less a predictable load. So it's an instance-based cloud, not a multi-tenant cloud. Other things, of course, we do continuous integration with Jenkins in our case. So the things we're using is Smalltalks CI and Parasol. Parasol is the system to do some testing on your seaside application. Doesn't have to be a seaside application, but it's integrated with it. And then we do just download the images into the Faro launcher directly from the Jenkins server. Going a bit faster because I like to open up some other things here at the end. Yeah, and this is a drawing made by my DevOps engineer. Just copy pasted in there. All the stones, of course, are monitored using Prometheus. So we have all the data running into and then showing into a Grafana database. This is then we also reported to Opsgenie. If anything goes down, we would be alerted and so on. But for that, I was rather thinking, I quickly open our Grafana interface here. So for example, this is the live operations setup about all the different, well, we just have an API exporting numbers that's ingested by Prometheus, and then you just import this into Grafana, and then you have an overview about whatever's running. This would be the operational dashboard, how much or where customers are with some errors on their logs. So there's a couple of errors, of course, here, or how large the databases are, how large the extent is, the number of users at this point in time. Should be lower now because we are refresh. I know, so it's going down. So for example, other kinds of overviews here could have one client's installation. Which one? I'll take this one, and then you get some numbers. So with everything here being monitored, we also have Monit looking at whether the system is running, and all these things would actually report alerts to a central system and alert the people who are on call through Opsgenie. That's basically the entire deployment setup of the system. And I'm gonna go back to this here. All right, I think I'm pretty much past my time already. I hope some of the things you see here have raised some interest. And any questions? I have a comment. Okay.
Given the use dynamics that you have, basically having like the peak user at Tuesday, maybe you're one of the few companies where deploying on Friday is actually safe.
Yeah. No, I prefer not to. We also like our weekends.
Hey, Johan, congratulations for the acquisition. Fantastic work. What can you share with us about the how much? Because I understood you were like 5 engineers working mostly in the.
On average, yes.
And how much did you guys, if you remember, if you were there, took the first go-to-market minimum viable version of it at the beginning, in the origins of.
You mean the initial effort to go to market?
Right.
That's the
Yes.
question?
Yeah.
So-
How much? Because to understand the velocity at which you discovered what's the actual product that people will buy for solving
like that.
problem.
Well, I think one of the success factors here is that this was, well, 3 software engineers, but especially our UX designer and then the project manager were people from the cultural sector themselves. So they were actually, they told us together with us, build the system, and they have the knowledge, but they also had the contact. So I think the success of Yesplan here was the combination of two. I think if you go back and find the movie which was recorded at ESUG in Barcelona, you would say the calendar hasn't changed much, and it hasn't. It actually looked the same. So, a lot of features which were added on top of that and not really immediately visible in the calendar main interface. But the initial effort to come to a working system which users were happy to start using, which were their basic needs, it was done by 3 people, but they were working only evenings and weekends. So I would say this is 1 person over 1 year. And that's the first version presented in Barcelona at ESUG. And from there on,
Okay, there's the power of Smalltalk, like being so few and so powerful to develop something that makes sense like that.
yeah, but we also had a lot of mistakes,
Of
which
course, but yeah,
which sometimes you can still find in
that
the
can happen
code.
in anything. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And the other question that I had is more on the SRA side of or how do you deploy? Because you mentioned 41 instances, right? So it's different clients. if I understood-
480 instances.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so with the Jenkins, it's one by one. You do first canaries. How you manage your maintenance windows?
Yeah, good question. No, we have one staging server I could show, which we just manually trigger. We could do it from Jenkins, just upload, which actually just triggered the Ansible playbook, which launches a Topaz, which launches Metacello to load the code. We also have pieces of JavaScript code, so that would be Webpack and so on to bundle that. But deployments to customers, it's we logging in and or running the playbook to upgrade a particular set of customers. Yeah, that's done manually, but scripted because we don't do one by one. Yeah, yeah. So the yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have 40 servers, and the thing what we do is we would do if we roll out a major version, we would just do 1 customer per server, and then see if everything goes right, and then the next day another one, and then that means 12 days, and we don't have automated fallback, which we should. A backup is taken, and then if something goes wrong, we need to intervene. So for us, no, in that case, we would just use predefined scripts, bash scripts, which just would say, well, roll back this customer to the backup and then leave it like that. So we have all automated tools for that. No, the Jade would be more, there is a bug, I need to debug. Yeah, then we connect to the Stone and we take a look at the object log to the stack there and start debugging. Or we take the backup, put it locally and use Jade locally. Anything can go. All right, thank you.